Welcome back to segment 4 of Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small. I'm co-host with Paul Ogden. Paul.
Morning, Mark.
Paul has just been talking our ear off today about whether the U.S. is biased towards Israel. Our guests are Lorey and Jeff Cox. We're coming to you from Big Hat Books, 6510 Cornell Avenue in Broad Ripple.
And we might get contact information or websites again.
Yeah. Contact
Kurt
information.
has no website. He just lurks on other
Stealthy.
websites. Stealthy.
And Jeff?
Well, I've got my blog, No Boxes Allowed, and I have my law firm, J.R. Cox Law, LLC. You can find it at www.jrcoxlawllc.com.
And any of you interested, Jeff is he has big interest in Michigan and University of Michigan, and I know that.
Well, there goes my lunch.
You mean hatred interest?
Oh, yeah, I was being facetious. Jeff, you're making a point right before we broke.
Yeah, if you look at the map of Israel just before the 1948 war and how it was divided.
And next week we'll be able to do that on our program. We'll actually, at that point we have it come on, but this week we don't. So go ahead.
It was divided, it was partitioned between the Jewish areas and the Arab areas. And it was sort of like a checkerboard. Many of the areas were not contiguous, they sort of switched back and forth. It didn't look either of them were viable as a state in that configuration. When Israel declared independence, a lot of the Arabs, they left of their own volition. They weren't forced out. They left of their own volition, and they said, can you get these people out? And the Arab armies from Egypt, Syria, Jordan, and they said, okay, we'll get them out for you. Everything will be like the way it was. And then Israel's army, which actually didn't have an army, it was the Stern Gang, it was the Irgun, it was some of the other groups. They formed the Israeli Defense Force, and they pushed them back. They defeated the Arabs, and they took a lot of territory from that. And then the Arabs, the Arab civilians tried to come back, and it was like, no, you're not coming back. You're staying out. You took their side. We don't want you back.
Well, wait a second. A lot of the people fled in fear of the developing Israeli military force, a lot of the Arab citizens. And also a lot of the Arabs who lived on that land were forced off the land by laws that were created specifically to eject them off the land.
A lot of those laws were created after the war, though.
Well, okay.
Because like that one you were talking about that
if you're absent from the
you were
land.
absent, you had to be absent during the war. If you were absent during the war, that was it.
Yeah,
That's where it counted.
Well, but what happened was, eventually, you have the modern state of Israel, and you have a lot of people who had lived on that land for generations who suddenly were ejected. And you had giant refugee camps in Jordan, in Syria, but especially in Jordan. There were a lot of...
also in Lebanon.
In Lebanon.
And that's why today, when you see that, why are these Palestinians still living in refugee camps all these years later? It's because they are the families of those people who left during the first Arab-Israeli war, and their descendants who are still in those camps, because the other Arab countries won't take them in. They don't want them.
And the population has grown.
Yeah.
Exponentially.
And so 48 happens, you've got all these people displaced. Israel is forming as a state. Then in 1956, I mean that's only 8 years later, and the UN had an agreement that was brokered by Ralph Bunche, who won the Nobel Peace Prize for the United States. He was an African American, I believe. Brokered a peace that didn't formally recognize Israel. It didn't cause those neighbors of Israel to formally recognize it, but they formally recognized the peace. And then in 56, in the interim, Gamal Abdel Nasser took control of Egypt and started a pan-Arabic movement to try and get more Arabs together and unified as a culture and as a people.
As nationalist movement.
Yes, and
Arab nationalism.
Yeah, and he was very charismatic and was very successful in getting a lot of attention and cooperation, it seemed. And in 56, there was a war over the Suez Canal, essentially. Is that correct?
Yeah, because Britain and France didn't want, especially Britain didn't want the canal going under Egyptian management. And so there was a military incident to try to engineer a takeover of the Suez Canal. It involved the Israelis to a certain extent, but it was basically done by Britain and France. And they wanted U.S. support, and the U.S. didn't give it. The U.S. sided with Egypt on this and said Egypt should have the canal. And after that point, the bid to take over the canal by Britain and France, it fell apart. They were furious with the U.S. over that. And Egypt, well, they weren't happy with us either, even though we sided with them against our allies. And so that helped poison U.S.-Arab relations significantly after that.
So we get into the 1960s, and John F. Kennedy, I believe, was John F. Kennedy the first president to have as a guest in the White House the Prime Minister of Israel?
That I can't tell you.
I thought it was Johnson.
It could have been. It was Eshkol was the prime. I know it was the Prime Minister.
I didn't look it up.
And so, Prime Minister of Israel had never been accepted as a head of state in the United States until 1964. If it was Johnson, 62. If it was Kennedy, or 63. And up until that point, United States aid for Israel had not been significant. I mean, in terms of monetary aid.
Well, maybe not to us, it wasn't.
Uh,
I think it probably was.
So it's still not significant to us.
Well, and so now we start to near the present day. 1967, there was a war. Israel had been weakened somewhat militarily between 56 and 1966, when Eshkol found out the lack of military preparedness that they had. He was furious because they only had enough ammunition, for example, for like 2 days, and they didn't have very many tanks. And he immediately was ordering. And Israel had gotten a bunch of arms from France. They had gotten Mirage fighters and various things. So it was 1967. Egypt, Syria, and Jordan all were angry with each other. Egypt had been involved in a war in Yemen for several years, and they all decided it was convenient to have as an enemy Israel, and for various reasons, and so they attacked Israel, and that was the 6-day war.
It was more. They attacked Israel, but a lot of it was Israeli preemption. When they were massing troops on the border. They were, getting ready for war. They were staging aircraft to attack, and the Israelis saw what was coming, and so they took the initiative in that when they saw that was coming, and it was pretty devastating for the Arab armies involved there.
Then the 73 Yom Kippur War would have been a flip on that.
Yes, it was.
Because in the Yom Kippur War, there was serious, and in the interim, by the way, Israel developed the bomb. So allegedly, my ass.
Well, it's also that Gamal Abdel Nasser was no longer in power in the Yom Kippur War, and he may have been a charismatic leader, but he stunk. No one has done more to destroy Egypt than Gamal Abdel Nasser did. A lot of the problems Egypt is having today, a lot of the reasons why it can't feed itself, is because of Gamal Abdel Nasser.
Well, and his insistence on having a war Yemen was Egypt's Vietnam. It was bleeding them dry, and he was wanting to stay there, and he realized that he couldn't do that any longer, and he wanted to have a plausible excuse for pulling troops out. But the Yom Kippur War, there was serious consideration to using the bomb. I mean, that from reports afterwards, because the Arabs.
Well, that's the one that I didn't think Israel was prepared for.
They weren't.
They really got taken to the intelligence.
They were
shed there. They were surprised.
Yeah.
Well, and Arab forces had advanced every place. They were overrunning
Well,
every.
in the '67 war, they'd taken,
The West Bank and Gaza.
Gaza.
And the Golan Heights, I think it was.
Well, Gaza especially, because they were on the canal. They had fortifications.
Oh, the Sinai.
The Sinai.
Yeah.
On the canal. And, they just kind of left observers there.
Yeah, so
And the Egyptians just waltzed right across it.
So Israel had taken the Sinai Peninsula in the '67 war,
And not given it back.
and that's a big part of what's at issue today is the territory that Israel took in the '67 war, because they took the West Bank of the Jordan, they took the Gaza Strip. Those portions were Gaza Strip was Egyptian, the West Bank of the Jordan was Jordanian, the Golan Heights were Syrian, and the Sinai was Egyptian. And so they had taken all of that territory, and the Egyptian, Jordanian, Syrian armies moved really fast across all of that. And that was why it looked like Israel was going to be overrun. And also there was I read the story.
They could have been.
Yes, they could have. And it was on the Jewish holiday.
Yes.
Which is why they invaded when they did.
And there was one report that was the closest point at which the United States had come to nuclear war, because Nixon directing nuclear missiles.
So are you saying people drinking martinis are not qualified to be in government?
No, I'm saying when they're drinking martinis all the time because they're about to be impeached as President of the United States, that they're probably not the best people to have with their finger on any button, even the remote control for the television. But we got through that, and then we are where we are today. The United States gives what some might in cavalier fashion be consider not very much money to Israel, but we give them billions of dollars a year in aid.
Well, officially it's tax money, not counting the money that comes from American Jewry.
That's true. That's true.
Well, let's not gloss over the Camp David peace accords that Israel reached with Egypt under Anwar Sadat. That's where
and Jimmy Carter.
Well, it was mostly done by Begin and Sadat. Jimmy Carter basically provided the table at which they sat at.
And just to clarify too, Begin and Sadat were both terrorists. They'd both been terrorists. Sadat had acted in terrorist.
Yeah, he had worked under Nasser.
Yes, and Begin, of course, blew up the King David Hotel. So you have these two former terrorists sitting down talking, and they reached an accord. Egypt recognized Israel.
Egypt recognized Israel. Israel gave back the Sinai.
And that was huge.
That was
Plus,
huge.
Egypt's economy didn't just keep going, because that was killing them.
Yeah, and Sadat knew that it was killing him. He freely admitted that. Now, Egypt did not want Gaza back,
No.
which is pretty interesting.
Well, it's because it's full of Palestinians.
Yeah, and they don't want the Palestinians in any of the other Arab countries. And the Palestinians are Arabs.
Yes, they are.
Yeah,
and let's clarify. An Arab is somebody who speaks Arabic and is from certain areas.
But there's a jumble of different kinds of ethnicities that we call Arab just because they're Muslim and they speak Arabic.
Yeah,
I mean, the people that inhabit Palestine are ethnically different generally from the people in Egypt.
We're going to go to a fifth segment, and we'll be back in just a minute.